Welcome to the third season of Heard, Afros and Audio interview series. My guest today is Eboné Almon. How are you today?
I'm feeling cute. How you feeling?
Good. I'm feeling shiny. We'll move on. It's great to talk to you. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Same. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
having me.
So let's get started about the Professional Homegirl. What inspired you to start the Professional Homegirl podcast, and how did you shape it into the safe space it is today?
So I started the Professional Homegirl podcast 9 years ago because 9 years ago I lost my grandmother. And my grandmother was like my entire world. And so at the time, therapy wasn't as attractive and as popular as it is now. And when I was going to therapy, I was just like, I really need to find someone to help me out because I was about to lose my. Can we curse?
Oh,
Oh,
absolutely.
I was about to lose my shit.
Hmm.
So I was going to therapy and I was just talking about all these things that were starting to really affect me. And obviously, me losing my grandmother. And then I started getting these resources and tools. And I'm like, it would be cool if I was to create a platform where women like myself can just come on and not have to show face because a lot of us were taught to show face at a very young age. And so I was just brainstorming and thinking at the time, and I started the podcast maybe it was 6 years ago exactly. And a lot of platforms didn't offer women a safe space to just be. And so I started the podcast, and I always had this superpower of like just making people feel comfortable and them telling me all their business and shit. And I'm like, let me just take it to this audio space. And I think that's how it became such a safe space for so many women to just feel comfortable. And now men, because now I have a men's series, but for them to just come on and feel comfortable to share their story with me.
I understand completely the importance of grandmothers
Yeah,
and losing them. I had the opportunity to have a great grandmother up until I was in my 20s,
same.
and yeah, and now my grandmother is in her 90s, 94
Oh
years old.
my God, God bless her.
Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely. So yeah, I understand the importance of that and the need for some type of sanctuary and refuge from that heartbreak because that's what it is. They're so
Yeah.
important.
Heartbreak would take you out. And losing my grandmother, especially because that was the first time I ever experienced death in my family. And it really broke me down. And I feel like I wish that there were more tools that could prepare people for grief because grief would have you out here with no edges. It would have you stressed out. So I think that's another reason why I wanted to start the platform, just to give people breadcrumbs on how to navigate through life because we don't get no manual with this. And a lot of times our parents may not know, our grandparents don't want to talk about certain things. So I just wanted my podcast to be like a pink print for everyone.
Mhm. Yeah, and you start to realize that as life goes on and things just keep happening, setbacks and different things that take you out, and you wonder why it's so heavy, so heavy, so heavy. And then you start to say, oh, wait, I didn't heal myself from the first heartbreak or the second or the third.
Yeah.
And now it's the fourth, and I'm still unhealed. And it's so necessary for us to take that pause, get those tools and resources, mostly from people who can relate, and
Yeah.
can share their own experiences. So I really appreciate that about the platform. Respect that a lot.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So your podcast focuses on sharing stories of resilience and transformation. How do you create these stories and create an environment where guests feel comfortable sharing their truths?
I don't know, cause I feel like on the show, like we definitely talk about a lot of heavy shit, and sometimes there's a few episodes and I'm just like, whoo, I gotta take a minute because it's really traumatic, but also in the same time inspiring. I always tell my listeners there's beauty in brokenness, but it's really inspiring to see so many people go through different things, and then you be thinking that your shit be heavy, but then when you hear these stories, you be like, oh my God, I could never, like, how dare I complain about something, and I'm just hearing this person overcome some of the most craziest things and they still here, still smiling, willing to share their story. I think people sense my energy. I think that once they see the show, they listen to the show, they see that the show is coming from a good place. And then also, I always tell people that your storyline can be someone else's lifeline. And I think when people hear that, it makes them want to open up because a lot of times when we go through things, we went through that because nobody putting us on. So I went through that so you don't have to go through that. And I just wish
Hmm.
that we should be a community where we are sharing things regardless of how it may seem, regardless of the judgment that it may bring, because we're all here for each other. And I really, truly believe that if we start sharing things, a lot of people won't have to go through a lot of the stuff they encounter because they now have access to information.
Hmm. It's the thing about feeling alone when you keep it all to yourself,
Right.
and when you're able to express it, then you realize, oh,
I'm
wait,
not the only
someone.
one.
So I'm curious, just based off of that story that you just shared, how do you refuel and revitalize yourself from taking on so many other people's stories? Because essentially it's energy.
Yeah. So honestly, I've been doing this for 6 years, and the stories really don't bother me. The only stories that are a little triggering for me because of my childhood is obviously child abuse stories. Or I had this one story that really messed me up, and I wasn't gonna put it out. But for the most part, it was this one story. The name of the story was I think it was my season 2 premiere. My father's mistress killed my mother. And that
Mm,
was by far one of the hardest conversations I ever did. And for me, when you listen to the story, you can actually hear, because her mother passed away when she was a child. And so my guest at the time when we was having the conversation, she's in her 50s. But when you listen to the conversation, you can hear her voice revert back like childlike. And that was a
mm,
lot. To me, it felt like she couldn't articulate what was going on because she pretty much went back into that time frame when she was a kid, and that was really hard. So I think for me, when conversations are challenging like that, obviously I pray, and then I just do things that make me feel good, and then it also reminds me, what's my why, and that story was the perfect reason for my why. So I eventually put it out, but that was a really hard conversation.
mm. Okay. One thing I want to acknowledge is that you've been here for 6 years, and so congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And doing the work because it is so important. There is such a power in podcasting and even
Yeah.
healing podcasting of being able to express those things out loud. Sometimes it's the catalyst for moving on and moving forward because you finally got it out. Can
And it's
imagine for some.
therapeutic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. So I can imagine even for some of your guests, it might be the first time, and you might have heard this. I've heard this several times when I interview or simply talk to people as a coach, and they say, "This will be the first time that I'm saying this. Just know that."
Yeah.
And it's so important the work that you're doing. I just want to say thank
Thank
you for
you.
being
Thank
in this
you.
space for sure. So you mentioned being discovered on Instagram by a major network. Can you share how that unfolded and the impact it's had on your podcasting career?
Yes. So I remember the day when Charlamagne the God was in the Breakfast Club, and he was saying how they was launching the Black Effect Podcast Network. And I just remember hearing God saying, "You're gonna be on that network." And I knew I was gonna be on that network. Like when I tell you, I was telling everybody, I was talking about it every day, all day. And I also believe in the power of the tongue. So I was pretty much just speaking life of my podcast because I knew that my podcast was good. I don't think it was the best, but to me, I just knew that what I was doing was very impactful, and I just knew that I was going to be on this podcast. So I used to sit, and it's so funny because I shared this in front of Charlamagne one time he was on stage, and I used to send him DMs every week when my episode dropped, and he used to dub it, right? But I was like, you know what? At the end of the day, delay does not mean denial, and I just knew that eventually, at some point, the stars were going to align. And so maybe a year or two later, on their Instagram page, they posted that they was looking for a new show to add to the lineup. And when I tell you, I heard God said, "Girl, this is it. You better go for it." And the crazy thing is, as soon as I opened up my Instagram, that was the first thing I saw. So I was sending this to all my listeners. I was sending this to my friends, my family, anybody who was following me on my page, the Professional Homegirl, and on the PhD podcast page. I was like, please add me. But I knew I needed to stand out because everybody wants to be a part of a large network. And so I was like, please put my logo. And my logo is a flamingo, which means beauty, balance, and grace. So I was like, please put this little bird because I know she gonna stand out amongst everybody else. And everybody started tagging me. I think in the first couple of hours, I got 300, 400 tags, and all you
Wow.
saw was the little pink flamingo. And so I saw Dolly Bishop, who's the president of Black Effect Podcast Network. She was in the comment section, and remind you, I was DMing her too, but she was ignoring me. So I was like, all right, this is weird because I'm not used to being ignored. So I saw that she was in the comment section, and I was like, she's never active like that. So I'm like, hey, Dolly, can you please check your DM? I sent you a whatever. I would love to just have an opportunity to speak with you about my podcast. And she was like, no, we all family. Say what you guys say in the comment section. So I'm like, all right, cool. People started liking my comment. And then Dolly slid in my DM. And then the rest was history. So being a part of the Black Effect Podcast Network obviously opened me up to just more exposure. Like I feel like the problem with a lot of our shows, especially shows who started off like how I started off, is you just one person away from being seen. And I think that being a part of this network has definitely helped me to reach a larger audience, obviously helped me to get more opportunities and just to share my purpose and my mission. And being a part of this network really has changed my life.
That's awesome. It says a lot about alignment, right?
Yeah, alignment.
Persistence,
Listen.
And believing that what you have and what you're doing is worth the attention, the support, and being seen. And there's something to be said about you continuously pursuing something, even with the perception, right? Because really, I'm sure they get mad DMs.
Yeah.
I experienced that as well. So I can't get to everything. I may want to, but it's just
It's hard.
impossible. And you might be the one in the morning, and by noon, there's 100 more that's been taking you down to,
Yeah.
the 100th DM. I really appreciate you saying delay doesn't mean denied. I believe that wholeheartedly as well. I appreciate you saying you're only one step, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of people give up right before that
Yeah.
next. All of these things I just wanted to really highlight because it's important for folks who are listening to understand that you've got to be so determined
You gotta be
to get
delusional. Like,
that too.
you
Right.
have to be so delusional and so consistent. Even when I first started 6 years ago, I didn't have no intro. My sound was crappy, but I just knew that at the end of the day, my message was impactful and it was necessary. And I just stayed at it, just kept growing. And next thing I had an intro, I had a new song that was cute. Next thing I was having more guests. You have to just really believe in yourself and just be consistent because I believe that if I wasn't consistent, I wouldn't have been on this network. The fact that had my own website, I had my brand, I had everything that was already formulated. I just needed y'all support. That's one thing I
Mhm.
told Dolly when we was on our call. I was like, look what I was able to do all by myself. So imagine what I can do with your support.
Absolutely. I love that, and I think for the people that are watching and listening,
Hmm.
that is something that will definitely inspire them to keep pushing,
Yeah.
um, because podcasting is a long game.
Podcasting is a lot of work.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. What
Yeah.
advice would you give the podcasters looking to leverage social media for visibility and growth?
As cliche as it sounds, just be consistent. I think that once you train your audience that, hey, my show comes out every Tuesday, so you know I'm going to post a clip on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or just keep reiterating. Listen, all these big companies like Nike, Adidas, whatever the case may be, they going to keep drilling in your head that you need this, you need that, and then eventually you're going to buy. So I think that you just have to be consistent when it comes to communicating with your audience because the moment that you're not consistent, it's a million other podcasts they're gonna forget about yours. So I just think that building those relationships, and then also I think for me, like I treat my professional homegirls like my friends, and they are my friends. So I talk to them, I receive emails, I check in with them, I follow them, like, just to build that rapport because your audience is so important. They're the reason why I got my deal. So I will always rep my professional homegirls because I would not be where I'm at if it wasn't for them.
Yeah, for sure. And that is the importance of recognizing how powerful your listeners are,
Yeah,
essentially.
community.
And yeah, yeah. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So, what moments or feedback have shown you that the Professional Homegirl podcast is making a meaningful impact?
Guys, so I remember years ago I did this episode about this girl. She had herpes, and so this girl sent me an email and she was telling me how she was about to commit suicide. And by listening to that episode, it really saved her life. And I don't know, I knew I was making an impact, but it was so like in the beginning of my podcasting career. And that really broke me down because it's like you just never know who's listening to you. And that's why I get a little annoyed when people have access to these mics because these mics are very powerful and our voices really do matter. And you just never know how you can really help somebody. So I think that when I receive emails, or I call them love letters, or when I receive DMs and stuff, like that really makes a difference. And it also keeps me going because any other job or any other passion or dream, it's exhausting at times. Like it's a lot of work. And one time I was having a really rough day and I was just like, fuck this shit. Like, I'm tired. And
Hmm.
one of my listeners, she hit me up mad random. And she was like, oh my God, Eboné, like, I don't even think you know what you're doing. Like, she really poured into me. And we was talking one day and I got emotional because I was like, girl, you really saved my day. Like, I was really ready to just walk away because sometimes it really get discouraging when you know what you're doing, but things are not adding up the way that you feel like they should because you should be a lot farther than what you're doing because you are doing something that's, that's feel good, but sometimes feel good takes a little bit longer than other things. So
Hmm. Hmm.
receiving stuff
Yeah.
like that, and then I also tell people like, let people know how you feel about what they're doing because you just never know how it can really affect the talent.
Yeah, and so often, people who are on the mic and now that you're on Black Effect, people forget that you're still a person.
Yeah, I still
that
got to work,
needs
child.
support, that needs to be poured into.
Yeah.
And that is so important for people to recognize that just because you think whatever you think about me, they call it the parasocial aspect where you think you know someone that and you don't.
Yeah,
And just taking that time to pour into someone else, it really does change the game for those of us who are doing the work every day.
absolutely.
So, how do you ensure that the stories you share resonate with your audience while staying true to the voices of your guests?
You know what I love about my show? Because we're black, right? So you can just
Mhm.
tell when somebody black or where they come from. And I really love hearing the different voices on my show as far as like the tone or the verbiage. It's something about when you hear somebody that look like you, even though you can't see them, like you're seeing yourself. And I feel
Mhm.
like the show definitely gives a platform to the voiceless. And I think that's the reason why the show has been so successful is because people see themselves in these stories. The titles alone would capture your attention, but to actually hear them and then they'll say certain lingos and stuff, and we get the kikiing and stuff, and obviously we want to make sure that the message is there, but gotta put the medicine in the candy sometimes. And I really do love hearing all these different women and now men voices and just like how they share their story. And then sometimes when you listen to these stories, they paint the picture so beautifully that you can actually see them while they sharing the story. And then when they take these pauses, or I don't know, sometimes I get so obsessed with audio because if the person can really just put the picture out there and paint it for you, you can really visualize it. So I think
Mhm.
that's one of my favorite things.
Okay. Now, I'm curious, when you interview, do you use video or is it solely audio?
So I know who the person is and I do use video, but when the video component is put out there, the person is blurred. So because they're anonymous.
Got you. Okay. The reason why I asked that is because I have, edited other podcasts and some women, and sometimes I'm like, y'all made a facial expression that we can't see. So how do you work around that when I know black women are talking or black people in general,
Right.
we using our faces a lot more than we are using our words
So one thing I had to
sometimes.
learn, because obviously these people, they're not podcasters, they just want to share their
Hmm.
story. So one thing I had to learn is to like, if we're laughing, we keep, oh my god, so y'all can't see this, but she made this face or she did that, just to help paint the picture. Because sometimes the guests and I will get so caught up in the conversation, and I'm listening to it, I'm like, the person can't really see. They know it's a good time. Facial expressions matter, or when they do certain things, black people, we talk with our hands. So
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
really try to be very descriptive, like, y'all, she just did this or she just did that, to really help the listener be able to visualize it.
Yeah, I figured you had determined a workaround for this
Yeah.
because you're a professional, and I wanted you to share that because there are people. We're on this mic, and I'm really hoping that that strategy and tip supports others because it's something that needs support, especially when we do interviews. So I appreciate that. What has been the most surprising or inspiring story shared on your podcast so far? And I know you mentioned a few of them. So if it's anything else you want to throw out there.
The most surprising episode taught me a lot about storytelling. So we just relaunched it again because before I got with the network, I had 200 episodes of my own.
Okay.
And so I think this was episode 19, but it just came out again. It was I'm a BBW porn star. And so we was having this conversation, and it was such a good conversation. Like we kikiing, she telling me about the day of a sex worker, all this other stuff, right? And towards the end, it didn't even dawn on me to ask her how did she even get in this business or anything. So when I asked her that, she told me how I think either her uncle pretty much introduced her to porn magazines. And it's just
Mhm.
the way she like went into it, and I was just like, wow. I don't know, it just taught me the importance of there is so many different layers in our stories. And it's up to the podcaster or the person who's pretty much facilitating it to like really dive deep into making sure that you share the entire story and not just fragments. And
Mhm.
sometimes it gets a little challenging because for my show, I don't like to go over an hour. Most New Yorkers take the train. So if the episode can't fit on a train ride, and once they get off and they walk into work, pretty much lost your listener, in my opinion. So
Mhm.
I always try to tell this amazing 20, 30-year story and try to fit it into a 60-minute conversation. That's one thing that I definitely learned from her. But another thing I learned was I was interviewing this really well known drug dealer. And I asked her something and she just started crying. And I was just like, wow, you have to really be able to evoke emotion out of people. It's like little things like that when you able to see certain things and you just like, okay, you don't want to go too deep unless that person want to go deep with you. But when you're able to evoke emotion, it really does something to the story and it shifts it, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
I feel like all my stories I've done, especially the stories that are out there, I'm just, oh, child, like, this is
So, how do you find your guests?
I do a lot of research. I love to read. Sometimes I go on YouTube because people love to tell their business on YouTube. I just go down a rabbit hole. Like if anything like, pique my interest, I like dig into it and then I can always tell if a person is a good guest because you can just tell if they use all of the words and all the letters in a tweet or if they talk about the same subject but or same topic in like in different videos or different ways. Like I just go down a rabbit hole. Like I go on Instagram and now at this point like people are sending me their stories, whatever, but I still do a lot of research. And then I like to touch on topics that are very taboo within our community. Obviously, like sexual abuse or things that Black people don't really like to talk about. And I think that's another reason why the show is so good because I feel like on my platform, you see some of these topics and you're like, what? Like, people are not talking about this stuff. And that's something that I want to dispel in our community is like, we need to start talking about this stuff so we can break all these damn generational curses, remove the shame, and anything else that may be holding us back because you really can't heal what you don't reveal.
Yeah, for sure. I love that answer because I do think that a lot of podcasters work really hard to stick to some model that wasn't written for them in the damn first place, right? And
Exactly.
so yeah, and so
Exactly.
for you to do that work, it opens up people's minds to say, "Oh, I've been trying to stick to this cookie cutter way of
Yeah.
finding guests and doing the work." When you are really being innovative in the way that you discover the stories that you want to tell.
Yeah, and I think also my favorite stories are my spiritual stories. So like I had a conversation with an ordained minister that was fire. Like I had a conversation with a Christian. I spoke to a nun. Black people love God. So
Mhm,
you have
mhm.
these conversations and I remember in this one conversation I had with this girl, she had children with a married man and she was saying how she would have dreams of her being in hell. And it's just like when you hear these stories, it really make you reflect on the decision that you're making because this can be your life. You're literally one choice away from going down the same hole or the same road that this person did. So I really love my show.
Yeah, it sounds like it, and that's a good thing to still feel 6 years in.
Yeah,
Yeah, it really is. It's important to love the things that you're doing, and a lot of times, that means that you have to be who you are.
yeah,
Curious, want to know these stories, because again, when you are trying to do something that's representative or respectable or whatever, or you're doing it in a mindset of what will people think, that you burn out really quickly because it's not what you want. It's what
yeah.
you think other people want.
Exactly. And just being, like you say, just staying true to who you are. Like, I
Mhm.
don't have to change my voice. Obviously, when I have certain guests on, like God's favorite soldiers, my language can't be that colorful. You just have to be yourself.
Word up.
So be yourself for sure. I think that's the beauty of having anything that's successful. It's just people know when you're faking
For sure.
it.
Especially your listeners who are really choosing you. They want to hear
Yeah.
from you. They want to hear stories that they're not gonna hear. If I'm hearing the same story, same interview style from every podcast that I'm listening to, what we doing? Eventually, I'm good.
Yeah. And then it's boring for me. I got to sit through this
Yeah.
too. So come on now.
Word up.
Yeah.
So, what role do you think storytelling plays in inspiring and uplifting communities, especially marginalized ones like ours?
Oh my God. Storytelling is so important. I just remember being nosy when I was a kid and listening to the grown folks talk and like just hearing those stories and like it really did something to you and like stories have power. One little story can really change somebody's life and I think it's just so important for us to share our stories. Like I can't express that enough. Like I don't care how bad it is. Even when I share my own story, like the things that I've been through, surviving child abuse. My mother is an alcoholic. My father, who I never met, I recently been talking to him every day since Christmas, and he's a recovering drug addict. People find power in that, and people feel seen, and it gives people hope. And that's the beauty of that's one thing that I want to do, is just really give people hope because this world is hard. It's really hard for people, especially those who are in marginalized communities. And sometimes all you have is hope. You know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
I think that storytelling is so necessary. And I think storytelling in the way that how we storytell, as far as using our voices, like not having to change up how you sound, not having to sound code switch, like just be yourself and get your story out there because it's gonna hit a lot harder and a lot faster than you think.
Mhm, mhm. So after 6 seasons, how many episodes do you have out?
Oh, child. I think that's so crazy. I'm like, damn, I should have celebrated, but I think I got over close to 310 now.
Wow. And
Yeah.
it says a lot about there is no single story, right? When it
Hmm.
comes to Black folks and especially growing up in America, there are a lot of similarities, right?
Oh
There's
yeah.
there's culture that we built from scratch and from the diaspora. But you could hear one person can go through something similar in the same neighborhood but have a completely different perspective, experience,
Yeah.
story to tell. So 310 episodes, I think it demonstrates that so much because sometimes, and you can see that the world who don't understand us in a lot of ways, they do think it's a single story. Like we're all the same people,
Yeah.
the same experiences, and we're just not
Yeah, no, we're
at all.
not. And I just launched the men's series, and I love, love, love talking to men. And even when you hear these men's stories, and it's just, wow, I don't know. Like, obviously, I know men have feelings, but when a man is comfortable and vulnerable enough to share how he really feels, like, that is something different. And
Yeah.
I'm so happy that we are starting to do that now because I think that, we need to start looking at men the same way we look at women. Like, men have feelings, men are vulnerable, men want to share their stories, and men want to feel seen as well. And the stories I have on the show from the men, I'm just like, it's just a really beautiful thing. And then, when a man feels comfortable with a woman, and then I get to talking like a man, so we really kiki and stuff. And like, it's just a really good time. And like, storytelling is so important. I can't express that enough. It really is.
Yeah, no, it really is. It's the expression of self. It's the expression of the inner
Mhm.
world and the experiences, and it is important for all of us to be able
Yeah,
to share, as animated and as experienced as we are.
animated for sure.
So, what's one thing you wish you knew when you started podcasting that you'd like others to know?
One thing that I wish somebody would have put me on to game when it came to the technical part of it. I remember I was recording on Anchor, so I had to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. I was hella guest, and that's why my audio was so shitty. And I remember one time I found out the girls recording on Zoom, and then they would upload it to Anchor, and I'm like, why didn't they tell me that? So I just wish that in the beginning, but then also you have to give yourself grace because what you don't know, you just don't know. And a lot of times,
Mhm.
even though whatever you need is within you or within reach, sometimes that may not always be the case until you do get around other like-minded people. So one thing I will encourage people to do is be around people who are doing the same thing. You like find your tribe, or your tribe will find you, but you have to open up your mouth and let people know exactly what you need. And that's something that I'm working on this year. Obviously, I want to take my show to bigger heights and do more things. But it's like Eboné, you gotta open up your mouth. People think that you are doing well or you're on this networking this net, which is true, but you want more. But people don't know how to support you if you don't say what you need. So that's
Oh
one
yeah,
thing I would definitely encourage people is like to let people know, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? Like, I am so consistent. Like, you gotta tell me no. And even when you tell me no, I'll be like, okay, not right now. So I'm gonna follow back up with you.
yeah, and it's a thing about starting right
Yeah.
wherever you are, however you do it, and
Fact.
it changes you, it shapes you, it stretches you in so many ways. So it is so important to be consistent,
For
more so for
yourself.
yourself. Yeah,
Yeah. Because you never know what you're capable of until you do it. So to
yeah,
listen to episode 1 and now I am in episode 300, like the growth is like crazy. Like sometimes I listen, I'm like, oh girl, like you came a long way, kid.
yeah,
Sometimes it's not even about for other people. It's about doing it for yourself.
yeah, for sure. So podcasting, you said, is deepen your sense of fulfillment, which is what we're talking about now. How has hosting a podcast shaped you personally and professionally?
Oh man. Obviously professionally I'm getting opportunities being here with you and always wanting to be a part of what you're doing, Afros and audios and stuff like that. And then just being able to like this is my dream. So the fact that I'm actually living in my dream, I remember praying for these things and now I'm literally in the middle of my prayers. And it reminds me that I can do whatever. Meet God where he's at. He do his part, I do my part, then we good. But personally, I feel the professional homegirl really saved my life. Like I really feel like the professional homegirl is a love letter, not to anyone that's listening, but to myself. I feel like the professional homegirl is the woman that I may have needed when I was going through some shit and I didn't have anybody. I just feel like sometimes I even listen to my episodes and I get emotional because I'm just like, damn, God literally gives you what you need when you least expect it. And it'll be like a random conversation and then I get a nugget and it really helps me out. So I'm so thankful that God gave me this vision because the professional homegirl is really changing my life. I feel like I'm getting choked up. The professional homegirl is everything, and sometimes she wears me out. But I'm so thankful. I think people think that we do it for them, but sometimes what we do really saves our lives.
Oh yeah, it's cathartic
Mad
and
cathartic.
purposeful. And
Mhm.
I often talk about as a coach and as a leader in these communities, sometimes we're looking for the purpose and it's fuck your purpose. What's the point? Or what
Yeah.
is the point? And the point for you sharing
Mhm.
these stories, letting people allowing space, giving permission for people to be seen and heard. And like you said, that is a value. I know for as a man, it's a value
Yeah.
for us to be seen and heard, more than anything in a lot of ways. Because a lot of times I'm like, do you think I don't have feelings? Do you think I don't feel
Yeah.
like what's going on here? Because I do.
Yeah.
So,
Be a man.
let's get that straight. So, yeah, so it is important. And I really appreciate it. I want you to talk a little bit more because you have mentioned that you have started this platform for the men as well. So, what's the name of that and what started you on that path?
So on the Professional Homegirl podcast, when you look at the episodes, it'll say men series. So I have
Okay.
obviously the original series, which is I interview women from different walks of life, and all of my guests are anonymous. And then we have the men series, which is the same thing, but obviously with men. And then I have my spooky series because I love scary shit. And the spooky series is every October, and we interview people that share real life scary stories. And those stories are like fucking insane. I'm just like, girl, you got spirits and shit in your house. It's so good. And then last but not least, one of my new favorites is called PhD Unlock. So we interview celebrities or notable figures or influencers, and we disguise their voice, and then they have the choice to disclose their identity. So
Mm.
it's super dope. But with the men series, I think it was just time. I think that when you're doing something for so long, like it's time to reinvent the wheel. At this time, I was podcasting for 4.5, 5 years, and a lot of men listen to my show. I want to see what they think and how they feel and stuff, whatever case may be. And it has been like eye opening, like the amount of men that was like, finally, girl, we claim professional home girl, but we want to be professional homeboys too. And so
Mhm,
I
mhm,
interviewed like a pastor. He shared his story of being physically abused by his wife, and he talked about how the church plays a role in that and how he felt like he would be displeasing God by not staying within his marriage. I spoke to two different men who shared their story of cross dressing. One is married, very heterosexual, and his wife knows about it. That was a very interesting conversation. He thought that he was the father of these kids, and come to find out he was not the father.
mm,
I shared another story with a man that was one of my favorites. I know a lot of men have went through this. He was sexually abused by a woman, and
mhm,
that was very eye opening. I also shared a man who said that he was delivered from being homosexual. So I try to, like, if I'm going to have conversations, like I really want to have conversations that I know that people may be struggling with. And the amount of like love I received from it, I'm like, okay, like the niggas here for it. So I
mhm,
really do.
mhm.
I thought it was time. It was just necessary because sometimes I just sit back and I'm like, damn, what am I about to talk about now? I've been doing this shit for 6 years. But then I also is always reminded that as long as we have breath, we always going to have options. So
Yeah,
that was one of the
yeah.
main reasons why I wanted to start sharing men's stories.
Yeah, that's great, and the importance of evolution in the art
Yeah.
and the creativity, and again, for yourself first, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. When it comes to being vulnerable and even sharing your own stories, how do you balance being vulnerable in your storytelling while maintaining boundaries? Because boundaries is an important thing.
Yeah, boundaries is important, but I also feel like I can't be having people come on my show and they giving up their tea and I'm not giving up my own tea. I try to like I ain't gonna tell all my tea, but because I do believe that some things should be kept close to me, to my heart, and what I want to keep close to me. So I do believe that for the most part, I'm an open book. I just feel like it's a disservice to my audience to have these people come on here, they being vulnerable, and I'm just looking at them. I have to allow certain
Mhm,
spaces to open up, and then sometimes even when I do share certain things, it's actually healing for me because I'm getting different perspectives about certain things. Like I remember I had a conversation with this woman. This was a really good conversation. The name of the episode was "My Mom and I Are Sisters."
mhm,
Exactly. And we was talking about celibacy. And like the conversation we was having was like I really needed to hear that because I was going through my own journey of celibacy. So I feel like you have to give in order to receive. Wherever giving
for
looks like,
sure.
but like I have to be able to give my audience something. And I think that's the reason why the professional home girls are like, that's my girl. Like they feel like they really know me because I am open when it comes to a lot of things.
Yeah, you bring up such an important point because there are a lot of people who are like, I'm a giver, I'm a receiver, I allow people to share with me, and I don't understand why it still feels like there's this wall between us. And that's because you're withholding, like, you aren't
Exactly.
sharing yourself. I love the point you made about self-ownership, because that is important as well. There's not everything, and you don't want millions of people out here thinking that they know you through and through when they're not your actual friends
Yeah,
or
because don't be
family
running up
members.
on me. Nah, you don't
Right.
know me, sis, like
Right.
that.
Yeah, word up. So that's important. Withholding when you are asking for other people's stories, actually a take,
Yeah.
and I don't think people understand that emotional intelligence aspect of it, is that when you're just taking other people's stories or vulnerability or their feelings and not providing it, that doesn't make you the greatest.
Yeah. And then when you open up and you have these conversations and you being vulnerable, but you're sharing parts of your story, the conversation gets so much more better. I can't tell you, I'm like, all right, girl, we got to get back on track. Because next thing,
Mhm.
we're really talking about a lot of things. And you just never know how somebody else is put in front of you to have a conversation and to help you with certain areas that you didn't even know that you need to heal.
Yeah. And I think it's also important that we're talking about this, especially for those aspiring new podcasters who start interviewing and they think, okay, it's all about my guest. So all I'm going to do is let you talk,
Yeah.
amplify you, and highlight you. But people, this is your podcast, your platform. And
Yeah.
so it is super important to add and provide, not take away from what the intent of the episode, which is your guest, but it's a give and take. That's important.
Exactly. And that's why I sometimes I go back and forth because I'm like, I don't really feel like I'm having interviews with people. I feel like I'm having conversations. And I think
Hmm.
that I've been having 5 stars for the entire time, but there's always one hater. And
Hmm.
she gave me a bad review because she felt like I'm too direct with my questions. And it was one particular episode I did, and I was so mad she gave me that bad review. I'm like, damn, I hate that Apple won't let you respond. But it's a good thing.
Hmm.
But it was a conversation I had with this girl, and she was very apprehensive about sharing her story. And normally when that happens, like I don't go deep with people unless you allow me to go deep. Then we can go deep. But her story is about how her stepfather gave her herpes,
Hmm.
and I asked her a question, and the reason why I ask certain questions because like I think that's another thing. People only hit the surface levels of certain topics, and it's no ask the questions that we need to know, so we don't have to keep going through this. Like no child should be going through certain things, and if they are, this is what the flags look like. And I think that's the reason why I like to say I have conversations with people because I don't like to like you can just tell when you read it or you can just tell when it's like it's not organic. And that's why
Hmm.
I don't share my questions with my guests. I'm like, no, I want this to feel like a conversation. I want to hear those pauses when I know you're thinking.
Yeah, and it's one thing to be vulnerable with others, but it's a whole nother thing to be vulnerable with yourself.
Facts.
And so helping people to understand that nuance and like, yes, you're telling me your story, but this is your opportunity to get real with it.
Right.
Um,
And be
and
honest.
be absolutely. So looking ahead, where do you see the Professional Homegirl podcast in 5 years?
Oh, child. So in 5 years, she would be 11 years old. So I see the Professional Homegirl obviously being an international household name. Podcasting is changing people's lives. Like everybody's a millionaire from podcasting. And I definitely want to do festivals. I definitely want to have a book out. I actually have coloring books out. It's an interactive and coloring book where the page that you're coloring, you can scan the QR code and it takes you to the story that matches the page that you're coloring. So yeah, so that's pretty cool. But I definitely want to be able to share my story and how I became the professional homegirl and how the professional homegirl saved my life. And I just feel like the professional homegirl is just gonna really be something that's gonna change the world, which already is, but in a bigger and even more impactful way. Just making it a household name, child.
I think it's really cool, and you've done it a couple of times. Is you call the Homegirl podcast "she," or you make it its own,
Cause
you
she
give it
is.
its own life. Yeah, you give your podcast its own life.
Cause she working you to
Yeah,
the bone, child.
oh, that's cool. And I think when you said that to me, I'm a creative person. I'm thinking all the time. I really love that you talked about creating a book about the journey for yourself,
Yeah.
even because I think those are the conversations that are missing. It becomes technical and so structured about what podcasting is and all of that, but really showing what that has looked like, that whole journey for you as well, is really unique and important. So I definitely encourage you to do that as soon
Yeah.
as you have the bandwidth.
No, I am for sure because I think
Yeah.
a lot of times we see people like us or even celebrities and people forget the process. Like Beyonce was not built in a day. And I think that when I share my story, especially being a part of this network, people are like, oh my gosh, she went. And I'm like, do y'all know what it took for me to get here? Like, I had a lot of hard nights. You know, it was one point in time that I was working 2 jobs to support my dream. So it's a lot. But I think that we do a disservice to ourselves and to others when we don't share that process.
Mhm,
And I have
mhm.
my days, even now, I'm like, oh, child, like, I'm ready to quit. It's a lot. It really is a lot to have a dream that only you can see. So I definitely encourage everybody to start and sharing their stories.
Okay. All right. And what's your support system look like? I've heard you say there's times, even with the success, and that's what people get to know, right? You could reach that goal, that thing that you said, this is where I want it to be.
Yeah,
Um, but it's never a finish line in the work that
I
we're
know. It's
doing.
never finished.
Yeah. So do you have a support system and what does that look like?
I do. So professionally, I have my network, and the beauty about the Black Effect Podcast Network is it's mostly ran by Black women. When I have my meetings with them, they can tell when something's wrong. Especially when I told you about the episode about my father's mistress killed my mom and child, we was all crying because it was like
Mm, mm,
it's just a lot. So I think that when you do work with people who look like you, who understand where you come from, we all have a common goal. It really makes me feel protected. And then as far as personally, like I have my best friends believe in me. My cousin, like he was with me since day one. So he's always like pouring into me. He think he's my manager child. And then most importantly, I have God. Like it took me a long time to get on the same page with God because we was not seeing eye to eye. And just to be able to know that he has given me everything that my heart desired, especially when it came to Professional Homegirl. I really just lean into those support systems and it really helps me to stay grounded and to just remember my
mm.
why. And anything worth having is worth fighting for, and it's not easy. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So I just have one more question
Yeah.
for you.
I feel like we keep keying,
Yo,
okay?
yeah, we having a good time. I'm enjoying this. So, are there any new topics, formats, or collaborations you're excited to explore in future episodes?
No, that's a good question because sometimes I think about, damn, I'm always thinking of different ways to expand the Professional Homegirl. But the thing is, I feel like a lot of times when people see my show or they see the titles, I do receive a lot of judgment, right? I do want to have more opportunities when I'm speaking, and obviously, I want to do live shows and stuff. And I just feel like a lot of things just have to make sense. It really does. And I also feel like it took me a long time for people to trust my voice. I think that's something that I don't take lightly because I do feel like my audience will listen to me now. Finally, they listening, but they'll listen to what I'm saying. If it makes sense for all parties involved, why not? Collaboration is the key to winning. So
Hmm.
I'm open to it. Like I love doing workshop classes. Like I do a lot of Charlemagne the God's events, and it's been really good. So if it helps and it helps me to get the mission out there, the Professional Homegirl, and to remind people that they are not alone, hell yeah, why not?
Nice. So, yeah, again, I
What you
mean,
trying to do? You trying to collaborate?
I'm always listen. Afros and audio is about community and collaboration, and our commitment to
Yeah,
that. And so there's always that opportunity in amplifying and highlighting our voices because what we're doing is archiving these experiences, in
yeah,
real time. And there's nothing else like it when it comes to podcasting. And I think your podcast is really an embodiment of sharing all of these different stories,
yeah.
culturally, relevantly, and sharing yourself and shining brightly in
Thank you.
yeah, for sure. I just love this opportunity to get to connect with you.
Me too.
Yeah, and understand more about what you're doing. It is important work, and the more we understand how valuable this work is that we're doing, I think we can attract more people to getting on this mic. And it's a thing to be said like, y'all stop. We don't need no more, but we do.
Yeah,
It's not saturated with us and being able to hear stories from people that you may not otherwise. Ain't nobody sitting
yeah,
around just talking to people, a
yes.
BBW one star. Ain't nobody just having conversations. So that makes what you're doing a trailblazing experience. And I'm sure you already know that, but I just want to say it out loud again.
Thank you. I'm trying to be like your grandma and live the 90 child. So I'm just trying to do the
For
Lord's
sure,
work.
for sure. So yeah, it's so important. So thank you again. I want you to tell folks how they can find you online, listen to the podcast, the coloring book, all those things that you
Yes.
want folks to know about. And then if there's any way that we can support you and rally around you, please let us know.
Yeah, so please listen to my show so I can keep these checks coming in, okay? So it's called the Professional Homegirl Podcast. It's wherever you get your audio at. We are also on YouTube at the Professional Homegirl. I'm on Instagram at the Professional Homegirl. TikTok at the Professional Homegirl, and Instagram with the podcast, the PhD Podcast. The coloring books is located at www.thephdpodcast.com. Also, we are available, I think, in 10 bookstores, but they pretty much sold out. So I'm working on the next edition of the coloring books, and I'm working on a Mommy and Me set because Even though Black people support me, I always have to give a disclaimer like, look, mama, there's some like, these are grown folks coloring books. I just want to let you know because I want your mama coming to curse me out. And it's so funny because they'll support me, but they'll turn the pages out because they want their, for obvious reasons. Definitely keep in contact with me with my socials. And then also, if you have a story, because I'm always looking for stories, please make sure to email me at hello@thephdpodcast.com. So, yeah.
Are there guidelines for the stories that you accept?
No, just be yourself.
Thank you so much for this conversation
Yeah.
today.
And hopefully, y'all see me at the next Afros and Audios Festival.
That would be amazing. I'd love that.
Okay. Got to put pressure
All
on
right.
these men, child. Thank you so much.
All right.